Hey guys, welcome to That Florida Feeling. I hope everybody's having a great week. I hope you enjoyed listening to Jen from Main Love, my last episode. That is an amazing company and she's an amazing person. If you get the chance to try the water, do so. You will not be disappointed. It is now my new favorite canned water. Even the still water is so good compared to bottled water. Also, if you haven't checked out Unfiltered Studios, check them out. They're amazing people doing an amazing podcast. I absolutely love being able to interact with this group of people, and I think you guys will really like their podcast. They do have something for everybody. So today we're going to talk about a place well known in Florida. No, not Disney, not Universal, nothing in Orlando. Although it is only about an hour from Orlando. I'm referring to Cape Canaveral. Cape Canaveral is a cape. It's literally a cape in Brevard County, officially on the Space Coast. And it actually was called Cape Kennedy from 1963 to 1973. It lies just east of Merritt Island, but it is separated by the Banana River. Yes, that's a real river in Florida. Like I said, it is known for the Space Coast, and it is the site of the official Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Yes, there are signs that say Space Force. I've seen them myself. It's also home to the Kennedy Space Center that is on Merritt Island. The Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station are not the same thing, by the way. They're not. And Merritt Island is home to the actual Space Center. But Cape Canaveral is actually a really cool place outside of the Space Force. It is home to Port Canaveral, which is one of the busiest cruise ports in the world. Have gone out of it myself. It's also home to the Cape Canaveral Lighthouse. It's also home to Mosquito Lagoon, Indian River, Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge is not far from it, and the Canaveral National Seashore are all fun, great places in and near Cape Canaveral. But how long has Cape Canaveral been there? Well, it's been there a really long time. Humans have probably occupied the area for the last 12,000 years. During the Mount Taylor period, which is 5,000 BC to 2,000 BC, that was actually covered. It was covered in just groups of people. After the Mount Taylor culture kind of really succeeded and then kind of went away, we had the Orange culture, which is actually one of the earliest cultures among the North America to produce pottery. So this is actually a really cool culture, and it is home to, it made part of its home on Cape Canaveral. The Orange culture was followed by the St. John's culture, which lasted until European contact. And the St. John's culture really went from Jacksonville, Amelia Island, Jacksonville, St. Augustine, all the way down to Cape Canaveral. And of course, the Indian River was really kind of more their home, the St. John's River and the Indian River. And they actually had a really good culture. It was a really, really strong culture. It is the ones that ended up making contact with the Spanish. Of course, during the first Spanish colonial period around the Indian River and south of Cape Canaveral, it was by the Ayes people, which mainly settled around the Mosquito Lagoon and a little bit north of the Cape. There was also the Surquot, I can't say this one, I tried. I looked it up, I knew how to say it, but the Surquot people, they were also allied with the Ayes people. But it's really unclear if they spoke Timucua or Ayes language. But it's really interesting to see how all the tribes kind of allied together and kind of had their own little trade route and really made a good culture. Of course, by the early 16th century, 1500s, Cape Canaveral was noted on maps, although it was not named. They just kind of drew that there was a thing there. It was eventually named by the Spanish explorers in the first half of the 16th century as Cabo Canaveral. The name Canaveral in Spanish means reed bed or sugarcane plantation. So I guess they thought that it was full of reeds or a great place to grow sugarcane. It is actually the third oldest surviving European name in the United States, so Cape Canaveral stuck. The first application of the name, according to the Smithsonian, was from 1521 to 1525 by a Spanish explorer, Francisco Gordillo. And basically, he noted that a point of land was jutting out into the Atlantic Ocean with swift currents. And actually, that is where a lot of shipwrecked sailors ended up getting pushed into. They also called it the Cape of Currents, but by 1564, Cape Canaveral appeared on many maps. English privateer John Hawkins and journalist John Spark actually gave an account of their landing at Cape Canaveral in the 16th century. A Presbyterian missionary was wrecked here and living among the Indians. Other historians tell of French survivors from Jean Ribault's colony at Fort Caroline when the ship Trinity wrecked at the shores of Cape Canaveral in 1565 and managed to build a fort from the wrecked timbers. So as you can tell, it's kind of where the currents that go through that area kind of just take you into. In 1571, Pedro Menendez wrecked off the coast of Cape Canaveral and encountered the Ayos Indians. From 1605 to 1606, the Spanish governor of Florida, Pedro de, I can never say this name, Abria, sent Alvaro Mexia on a diplomatic mission to the Ayos Indian nation. The mission was actually successful. Diplomatic ties were made and an agreement for the Ayos to receive ransom for the shipwrecked sailors they returned. So basically they were ensuring that their people were able to survive and make it back, which is kind of cool. The first Cape Canaveral lighthouse was completed in January of 1848 to warn ships of the coral shoals right off the coast. That's why so many shipwrecked people also had a problem there. The hurricane of August 1885 pushed a wall of water over the barrier island and just pretty much devastated Cape Canaveral and its adjacent areas. And if you've ever been there, there actually are quite a few barrier islands that you can see and some go to. But they're not tall. They're maybe an elevation of 10 feet over sea level. Like, you're not talking anything tall. Basically gave no protection. The ocean waves flooded the homesteaders and discouraged future settlement in that area for the moment. The beach near the lighthouse was severely eroded and prompted its relocation of the actual lighthouse west inland. In 1890, a graduating class of Harvard University started a gun club called Canaveral Club at the Cape. It was founded by C.B. Horton of Boston and George H. Reed. Again, snowbirds. A number of distinguished visitors, including Presidents Grover Cleveland and Benjamin Harrison, were reported to have stayed here. In the 1920s, due to the economy, the grand building fell into disrepair and burned to the ground. After that, around the 20th century, several communities sprang up in Cape Canaveral with names like Canaveral, Canaveral Harbor, Artesia, DeSoto Beach. And while the area was predominantly farming and fishing, so they probably had it right when they named it Canaveral, a sugar cane plantation. But a lot of people during that time actually saw that, like, this could be a resort for vacationers. This could be the new snowbird spot. But the stock market crash of 1929 pretty much stalled all development. In the 1930s, though, a group of wealthy journalists started a community called Journalista Beach, which is now Avon by the Sea, which is actually a really pretty area. The Brossier brothers bought houses in the area and started a publication entitled Evening Star Report that was actually the forerunner to the Orlando Sentinel. So the Canaveral has plenty of history behind it. Now, the actual construction of Port Canaveral was for military and commercial purposes, started in July of 1950 and was dedicated on November 4th of 1953. Congress approved the construction of a deepwater port in 1929, though. It was actually first petitioned by the U.S. Navy as far as 1878. But it was not built until almost 100 years later. It is now the major deepwater port in Central Florida. Now, of course, Cape Canaveral is known for other things, as we said. Cape Canaveral also became the testing site for missiles when legislation for the Joint Long-Range Proving Ground was passed by the 81st Congress and signed by Harry Truman in May of 1949. The work began a year later in May of 1950 under the contract with the Duval Engineering Company out of Jacksonville, Florida, and they built the Cape's first paved access road and permanent launch site. Hey guys, I just want to take a second to tell you about Maine Love Water. It's rooted in Maine, it's made with care, and it's designed to refresh body and mind. Stay hydrated, stay present, and enjoy Maine Love Water. The first rocket was officially launched at the Cape was a V-2 rocket named Bumper 8 from Launch Complex 3 in July of 1950. On February 6th, 1959, the first successful test firing of the Titan intercontinental ballistic missile was also accomplished. NASA's Project Mercury and Gemini space flights were also launched from Cape Canaveral, as well as were Apollo flights using the Saturn I and 1B rockets. So Cape Canaveral definitely has a very, very big background in the military and as well as NASA. But why Cape Canaveral? Cape Canaveral was actually chosen for rocket launches because of the Earth's rotation. That's right, it sits just at the right spot. The linear velocity of the Earth's surface is greatest towards the equator, which is towards Cape Canaveral. A relatively southern location of the Cape actually allows rockets to take advantage by launching eastward, which is the same direction the Earth actually rotates. So it's highly desirable to have the downrange area sparsely populated in case of accidents. Also, the ocean is ideal for this as no one actually lives in the ocean. The east coast of Florida has logistical advantages over potential competing sites. The Spaceport Florida Launch Complex 46 of Cape Canaveral Space Force is on the easternmost near the tip of the Cape. I've actually gotten to see launches from this. I think the coolest one was actually at Cocoa Beach. We were at Cocoa Beach, which is a little bit from Cape Canaveral, and you could hear it before you could see it. But then if you looked straight down the beach, like straight north, you could see the rocket thrusters, like you could see the flames. And it was very loud. It was much louder than I expected to be from Cocoa Beach. And you just see it go up, and then you see this trail start, and then you see it fall off, and it disappears. And it was such a cool experience. I also got to see them when I was in Palm Bay. Melbourne and Palm Bay are not very far from this either, maybe 30 minutes. Well, if you're speeding 30 minutes, traffic maybe 45. And I could see them off my balcony. And again, you could just see this one wasn't so close, but you would see the flames and you would see the trail. And they always did, for some reason, we always saw them at night, like midnight. And you would see them go up, and it would just eventually look like a shooting star. And that is actually one of the coolest parts about living off the Space Coast, is that you literally get to see it happen. In 1999, the North American Numbering Plan Administration added the telephone area location 321 as the area code for the telephones, thanks to a launch countdown. So that was kind of cool. Now, Cape Canaveral has been actually known by many things. When they first built a post office in the area, it was Artesia, and it actually retained this name from 1893 to 1954. It was Port Canaveral from 1954 to 1962, and then it officially became the city of Cape Canaveral from 1962 to 63 when a larger post office was built. In 1963, though, Lyndon Johnson issued an executive order renaming it Cape Kennedy after President John F. Kennedy, who had set the goal of landing on the moon. After the Kennedy assassination in 1963, his widow, Jacqueline Kennedy, suggested that they rename Cape Canaveral facility in memorial. Johnson recommended just renaming the entire Cape, and he announced it on a televised address on November 26, 1963, 6 days after the assassination on Thanksgiving evening. According to Cape Canaveral, it was officially renamed Cape Kennedy. Kennedy's last visit to the Space Center would have been on November 16, 1963, just mere 6 days before his death. And the final Mercury mission, though, had concluded 6 months earlier. Although the name was changed and approved by the U.S. Board of Geographic Names in the Department of Interior, it was not popular in Florida. Nobody liked it, especially bordering on the city of Cape Canaveral. So in 1973, in true Florida fashion, Florida legislation passed a law restoring the former 400-year-old name, and the board went along with it. The restoration of Cape Canaveral became official on October 9, 1973. And even Senator Ted Kennedy had stated in 1970 that was really a matter for the citizens of Florida. And you literally took something that had been named that for 400 years and changed it. Now, do we understand why? Yes, it was a great memorial. But people are going to learn Florida doesn't do what Florida doesn't want to do. The Kennedy family even issued a letter stating that they understood the decision, but NASA's Kennedy Center retained the Kennedy name in memoriam. The Gemini and Apollo and the first Skylab missions were actually all launched in the area when it was named Cape Kennedy. The first crew launched under the restoration of Cape Canaveral was Skylab 4, which was its final Skylab mission in November of 1973. Cape Canaveral is also home to the Space Force Station. Yes, the signs say it. I've seen it. It is also located in Brevard County and it's headquartered at Patrick's Space Force Base. Yes, I did laugh the first time I saw the sign. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys. The station is primarily launch site for the Space Force Eastern Range. Has 4 active launch pads. The facility is southeast of the Kennedy Center, which is on adjacent Merritt Island. They are linked by bridges and causeways. In fact, if you're driving in that area and you make a wrong turn, you will be stopped quickly. And of course, a lot of the first American space pioneers were launched from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I just hate saying that. I'm sorry, guys. I really do. So, they did a lot. They launched the first U.S. satellite, the first astronaut in orbit, first 2-man spacecraft, first uncrewed lunar landing, first 3-man spacecraft. It was also the site for the first spacecraft to fly past each of the planets. They did one that orbited Mars, the run that roamed its surface, first American spacecraft to orbit and land on Venus, the first one to orbit Saturn, to orbit Mercury, and then the first spacecraft to leave the solar system. Portions of the base are actually National Historic Landmarks for their association with the early years of the American space program. Like I said, it was first established in 1949 with the Joint Long Range Proving Ground, and that's really where it got its start. The Air Force is really the ones that run the Space Force Station. It used to be under the Navy, but it was transferred eventually to the Air Force. They did do a lot of really groundbreaking stuff there, especially Project Mercury, which was the crewed spaceflight program that was going to be launched from Canaveral by the U.S. Space Force crews. So it's a really interesting place. It does have a lot of activity, and it really is a great thing for that community, especially having the military there and then the jobs it provides. But honestly, people just want to go to the Kennedy Space Center. Let's be realistic about it. Another thing that Cape Canaveral is known for is actually the Cape Canaveral Lighthouse. It's a very historic lighthouse. It was established in 1848, like I said, to warn ships of the dangerous shoals that lie off. It is actually located inside the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and it is managed by the Space Launch Delta 54 of the U.S. Space Force. But it does have a Cape Canaveral Lighthouse Foundation that does help with it as well. It is the only fully operational lighthouse owned by the United States Space Force. The U.S. Coast Guard currently maintains the activity for the light for navigation aid, but it is owned by the Space Force. It is a 151-foot tower. It was first built and lit in 1968, relocated inward between 1893, excuse me. I am giving y'all 1868 was when it was first built and lit. 1893 to 94 was when it was moved inland. It was originally equipped with a first order Fresnel lens that was automated in 1967. Then it was retired from the tower in 1993, and it currently uses automation now. Like I said, it was built and lit, and like everything in Florida, a hurricane came and did bad things. Nathaniel Scobie was its first lighthouse keeper and oversaw the construction of the lighthouse. It was only 65 feet tall when it was first built, and it cost only $13,300, which would have been way more today. The lighthouse, though, did see some bad days. During the Seminole War scare, Scobie abandoned the lighthouse and refused to turn to his post due to the fighting in the area. Captain Mills Olcott Burnham was appointed to the next lighthouse keeper in July of 1853, and along with his position, he was given 160 acres of land as part of the Florida Armed Occupation Act, which kind of led to part of the Seminole War. Sailors didn't really like the original lighthouse because it was white brick, and the light was too weak and too low to be seen from far away. So, after that hurricane, they were going to build a second one. In 1860, the government actually approved the construction of the new lighthouse, but due to the beginning of the Civil War, it was stopped. The lamps and mechanisms of the lighthouse were removed from the tower by Burnham and buried in his orange grove to protect them from the federal raids. That's kind of genius, actually. At the end of the war, though, after 1865, the construction was resumed. And the chosen replacement tower was made with cast iron plate design so that it could be disassembled and moved to a new location at minimal cost in case the sea encroached again, threatening the lighthouse, like what happened after the first one with the hurricane. The conical tower was lined inside with bricks for stability and insulation, and it was situated about 80 to 90 feet from the original location. The new all-white lighthouse was completed in 1868 and again received a Fresnel lens. That was first lit on May 10th of 1868. Now, the lower 3 levels of the tower served as living quarters for the keepers and his assistant. They had a kitchen, a living room, bedrooms. It was actually designed to withstand flooding from storm surges that accompanied strong hurricanes by making the entrance of the tower on the 3rd floor and only accessible by an outdoor stairway. The ground level door was later added in the 1930s. And that was actually put to a test in 1871, only a couple years after the hurricane, or after the tower was built. A strong hurricane, strong storm hit and submerged the station. The lighthouse and its keepers survived, but the oil lamp and their drinking water were spoiled by the flood. The white lighthouse tower was eventually changed to its signature 3 black bands and 3 white bands in 1873, but the lantern room is still white. Soon after, the iron tower became unbearable because the Florida sun and humidity. Shock. They built and stayed in makeshift dwellings on the grounds of the lighthouse rather than actually stay in the oven-like tower. In 1876, funds were approved at the amount of $12,000 back in those days to make them a permanent dwelling. Shocked that something with brick and iron would be hot in the summer. No. Again, shoreline erosion happened because it's Florida, and they were going to move the tower again. The initial work to move the tower was started in October of 1893. The old tower, which stood next to the new tower for about 2 decades, was blown up, and the rubble was used to prepare the foundation for the new lighthouse. Okay, one way to do it. It was reassembled about a mile westward together with the keeper's house. The move took 9 months. The new lighthouse was relit in its new location in July of 1894. The lighthouse room was painted black during this move, which I would think would be hotter, but whatever. President Truman is actually the one that signed legislation titled Public Law 60 on May of 1949 that established Cape Canaveral due to the Joint Long Range Proving Ground. And this is how it became part of a military facility. This is really when it became that. The lighthouse did have to go through some restoration. Toxic lead paint was used to paint the lighthouse. And it had to be sandblasted off in 1996. The original copper lantern was also replaced with galvanized steel, which made it easier to use and better. In 2003, oil house located in the front of the ground floor door was restored to its original 1890 state. The winds had been damaging the roof. The worst of it came in 1970, and it was repaired as well. It was they redid the whole entire structure using modern materials to upgrade it. But a ground sample test was taken in 2008, showed very high lead levels in the soil around the tower, and the visitors were kept 50 yards away from the lighthouse for a while because they were worried about that. Can you visit the lighthouse today? Yes, you can. It is open to public visitors. It was previously part of the Air Force Space and Missile Museum public tour, but however, in 2013, due to sequestration, the space launch Delta 45 no longer offers tours in the area. Currently, tours of the lighthouse and nearby museum are done through the Cape Canaveral Lighthouse Foundation, which takes care of it. Visitors can only ascend to the 5th floor of the lighthouse, as the remaining floors have not been deemed safe. Okay. The Space Canaveral Lighthouse Foundation and volunteers are instrumental in restoring the projects and keeping it running. So that's one kind of cool thing you can do if you're in the Cape Canaveral area. Cape Canaveral is actually home also to the Canaveral National Seashore, which is basically 24 miles of undeveloped beach, and it is absolutely gorgeous. It is run through the National Park Service. It is actually the longest stretch of undeveloped coast on the Atlantic part of Florida. It's beautiful. Like, it's absolutely beautiful. You do have to pay to get in. They do have a fee at the park entrance. You can buy the pass online. That's what we did. And you can fish, you can sunbathe, you can swim, you can sit there if you're lucky and see something happen with the Space Center. But it's an absolutely gorgeous area that preserves the coastal hammock, flatwoods, offshore waters. You can see Barrier Island. You can camp. You can horseback ride. You can canoe, kayak, hike the grounds, fish, surf, swim, bird watching. It's really, really an amazing place to go if you're looking for like not a touristy area. I definitely recommend the Canaveral National Seashore. Of course, you can go to the Wizard of Oz Museum, like I talked about in a previous episode. There's beaches. There's the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge. That's another good one if you're into outdoors. Never got to go to this one. Always ended up at the National Seashore, but it's a beautiful place from what I've seen. And I had friends that used to go a lot. And it's great if you just want to, again, escape the hustle of a city or be less touristy. The weather is usually pretty mild, and you can actually fly into the Melbourne International Airport, which is only about, let's say 30, 45 minutes, depending on traffic. I will say that the Melbourne Airport is tiny, but it is great. I never had to wait. So yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a new place to stay and you're looking for something fun to do in Florida, maybe have a little history behind it, maybe see a space rocket launch thing, then I definitely recommend Cape Canaveral. The Space Coast is actually a beautiful area. It's also where a lot of people find treasure. I don't know how, but a little bit south of it in Vero, that's Treasure Coast. But every now and then it comes and makes its way up towards the Space Coast. So if you're looking for a new place to have fun, relax, enjoy the ocean and the sun, and yet still feel like you learned something, definitely check out Cape Canaveral. I have nothing but good things to say about the area. They have some great places to eat, great places to stay, and it's just a lot of fun. So hopefully you're going to add it to your summer bucket list. Now, do remember when you're there, you're a tourist. People do live there. Use your blinker. That's not a bad thing if you use your blinker, guys. Like, I cannot explain how many things I'm just tourists. Just remember, people do live there and they have places to be. Kindly remember that. The other thing I want you to do is not turn into Florida Man. The latest Florida Man, though, is actually Vikings wide receiver Jordan Addison. He became the latest Florida Man in an early morning casino bust. The wide receiver is, pretty well known. But he got booked into he got booked into a jail in Tampa. He was arrested at the Hard Rock Casino in Tampa early morning Monday, which was a couple days ago. Last week. And arrest records show that he was arrested at 3:46 a.m. for trespassing. Yeah. He was actually issued a trespassing from the Seminole Indian Police. Jail records show the former first-round pick was booked at the Hillsborough County Jail after being released that afternoon on a $500 bond. If you go and look at his mugshot, it's interesting. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, proof, guys, anybody can be Florida man. So don't turn into it yourself. It's just not worth it. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Definitely add the area to your bucket list to go see some things or visit or go to the Space Center. If you guys have any suggestions or want to hear about a place in Florida, please let me know. I'd love to hear you guys' suggestions. If you guys just want to say hi, check out the social medias. I'm on most all of them. I gave up on Twitter or X or whatever. I don't even care. I don't like it. I didn't do it. Like, I'm done. So it's still on there, and you can find old episodes on X, Twitter of That Florida Feeling, but I'm not really active on it anymore, guys. But if you just want to reach out and say hi, you can on any of the other social medias. You can email me at thatfloridafeel@gmail.com. If you think you have a great topic and want to be on the podcast, hit me up in an email. I'm all for Floridians being on a Florida podcast. I really appreciate you guys listening. If you do have a second, want to go give me a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, it is appreciated. I do hope that y'all have a great week. Drink your water. It's getting warmer. Hopefully we don't have another cold blast. I don't want it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to do it. But yeah, drink your water, wear your sunshine. And as always, guys, I just said drink your sunshine. I mean, there's got to be a drink called sunshine. Wait, wasn't it Sunny D? Okay, drink Sunny D. There we go. And as always, guys, that's your daily dose of sunshine.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.